Everybody, and welcome to the Irish NFL show. It's time for the Week 14 preview. So we have a big weekend ahead, lads. Big race for the playoffs is starting to heat up here, in fairness. Got a couple of teams who could even be booking their places there to the dance. I think you say booking your place to the dance, Colin. I've heard that's your phrase of choice. So what we have is coming up is 7 divisional games. A couple of bit of interest. One of Brady going back over to the West Coast to face his boyhood team, and with Tua versus Herbert on the Sunday Night Football. So there's a fair amount of us to unpack here tonight. And I should mention also, closing out the show tonight, we have an interview with Christoph Pink. He is now, let me make sure I get this right, Director of Quantitative Analytics from PointsBet. Now that is quite the job, and he's obviously PointsBet's a partner of the Irish NFL show, and by the way, they are hiring for tech roles right now, so check out pointsbet.ie. So stick around for that at the end of the show. And also, just to mention, Brian and Mark, who's not with us tonight, caught up earlier today to preview the LA Raiders game the LA game between the Raiders and the Rams, and you'll be able to catch that wherever you find podcasts. That went out this afternoon already. All right, with that preamble done, let's get down to business. So let's talk about some of these 6 p.m. games. The first one we're going to talk about is the big divisional clash in the AFC East. So the Jets are going to face the Bills, and the Jets beat the Bills last month in the first matchup. So I guess the question is, can they do it again? So maybe, Brian, let's hear your take on it, and I want to hear your pick as well this week.
Yeah, it's a very interesting game this weekend. Jets are in the wildcard spots in the 7th place, having had a difficult loss last weekend against the Vikings, and the Bills are back as the number 1 seed, potentially number 1 seed in the AFC, top of the division. Yeah, you're right, they played each other last month. I think it was early November. The Jets got the better of them 2017. In that particular game, I think what the Jets will have to do, did then and will essentially have to do again, is find ways to keep this explosive Bills offense off the field. The 2 running backs that day, Robinson, who was traded from the Jags earlier in the season, he had 48 yards and a touchdown. And Carter, the running back, had 76 yards and a touchdown. Run-orientated offense. That might change this weekend. We spoke about on Mike White on Monday. The guys were wearing the T-shirts in support of their new quarterback. I'm going to challenge that and had a bit of a poke at the Jets fans over that. But he did throw for 258 yards in this game last year. He had a poor game in the sense he threw 4 interceptions. But he has put up yards on this team, and this seems to be a team now that wants to move towards a more attacking-minded offense. So we'll be interested to see if they change the dynamic of what they did in the game last month. For the Bills, look, they've rebounded well since they had 2 defeats. One again there last week. They're coming off 10 days rest after played the Patriots on a Thursday. And Gabriel Davis, Stefan Diggs, these players have been really explosive. Kind of went off a little bit period during the season when they were losing games, but they've rebounded well. It's a tough one. Generally, people, like, from a betting perspective, it's quite a strong line, 9.5 points. So essentially what they're saying is the Bills should win by 10 or more. I say it's been a little bit closer than that, but I would have to side with the home team. The Bills are arguably the favourite for the Super Bowl. If they were to start the season, they probably still are. I think they'll find a way to win this game on Sunday and put the Jets in a precarious situation in terms of whether they can make the playoffs in the long run.
Okay, so Bills, you're calling Bills. Very good. Colin, how about you? What's your thoughts on the game and what's your pick?
Yeah, Calla, this is certainly an interesting game, and both teams, I think, obviously Brian mentioned the game a month ago, but both teams in different places now. Brian has talked about Mike White and them wearing the T-shirts, but earlier today, that kind of feel-good factor that they have with Mike White continued. He was doing his press conference where the QB, so once a week, at least once a week, the NFL mandate that the QB has to talk to the media, and Mike White was talking, and Elijah Moore and Michael Carter both rocked up to interrupt the press conference with their own questions. And Elijah Moore asked Mike White what he thought of the wide receiver room. And Mike White went through each of the wide receivers and pretended to forget about Elijah Moore's existence until the very end. Everyone laughed, everyone enjoyed it. So the move away from Zach Wilson and the way in which that has kind of energize the locker room is telling. I don't think Mike White is the answer for the team long term, but I think what this probably has answered is that Zach Wilson is not it. And I saw some rumors this week that they may be willing to potentially move Zach Wilson on to the Broncos, because the Broncos obviously could be looking for somebody. He's on a rookie deal and plays a similar style to Russell Wilson. Some would say a similar ability to Russ this year as well. But look, this is, I suppose, how does the Bills defense respond and the team respond to the news about Von Miller's ACL injury during the week? A huge loss with Von going out. He was brought in really for December, January, February football. That's what they wanted him for, but they won't have him. I think it's one of those games I really could see. But I understand Brian is right. The Bills are favorites, but I can see the Jets going in there and getting a result. I think Salah has done an excellent job, and I think that this Jets defense is really good. I don't believe either that the Bills have the running game that the Vikings had last week. What does concern me, I suppose, is the fact that the Bills have had the rest, and this is the Jets' second consecutive road game. But why not go for it? I've had it as a coin toss game all week, so I'm going to say that Robert Saleh and the Jets are going to do the double over the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
I could end up looking silly for that with the Bills putting up points, but I think after last week's loss, the Jets need a win. So I'm going to say, they managed to eke one out.
Okay, very good, Brian. I saw you itching to say something there. Did you have a throwback there?
I never got an opportunity to say I'm loving Column's retro Broncos jumper tonight.
Nice.
He's shown me on that one. I hadn't heard that rumor mill around Zach Wilson potentially going to Denver. What Colin has failed to answer or throw into his comments is whether he would be happy with that particular deal. If it was that's cleared that up, Calla.
That's a strong Broncos shake of the head there. Okay, fair enough. All right, so we have a call for the Jets and we have a call for the Bills. And for what it's worth, I'm going to go for the Bills, seeing as that's how I got into American football. I'm not basing it on anything other than that. Jim Kelly was my guy.
I didn't expect Calla. Sorry, I know Colin always tends to. We all have games where we see different views, and I just didn't expect this one to be the one straight off the bat where Colin would be going against me this week.
I tell you. All right. We started in a contrarian way, so let's move on to the AFC North matchup. So we have the Browns going to the Bengals, coming off that big win against the Chiefs last week. The Bengals. Now, from what I can see here, it seems the Browns have won the last 5 times here in this matchup. So, what do you think? Can the Bengals break the streak? Maybe I'll go to you first this time, Colin. What do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those ones, Calla, where you're kind of caught because there are these jinxes that exist within the sports world writ large, I suppose, that certain teams always seem to win, no matter how they're playing or what is happening. They always seem to be able to get the victory. And you would say the Browns certainly had a lot of luck last weekend because they didn't play particularly well against the Texans, but the Texans, managed to be their own worst enemy, as recurring theme there in Houston. The Bengals are really coming into form at the right time. And when you look around the league, I think Burrow is playing at a level equal to anyone at the moment. Talked a little bit about it on Monday Night Show. If the Bengals were to win out, that he could make a late push for that MVP race. And I'm going to say that the Bengals realize that they are in with a real shout. Potentially, if they were to win out of even the number one seed, though I think that it is unlikely. But I am going to say that Joe Burrow's magic, alongside Jamar Chase, alongside T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, will mean that the Bengals manage to stop the Browns from making it 6 in a row.
Okay, so Bengals it is. And that topic of who's in the conversation for MVP, I think that's one I'd love to pick up at another point, because I think there's some interesting ones you've even thrown out between Monday and tonight as well. All right, Brian, how about you then? So we have a call for the Bengals. What do you see it that way, or do you see the Browns holding on to it and keeping the streak going?
No, I'm aligned with Colm on this one. I was quite surprised. Colm is right. You get these jinxes in the league, as we touched on Monday. 3 wins in a row against the Chiefs in the space of 12 months for this Bengals side. Yeah, since Stefanski took over as head coach of the Browns, and he's had some struggles and he's had some difficult times, and obviously there's been a lot of upheaval there. And then obviously the Deshaun Watson factor that he was suspended for the first 11 games. Yeah, they played each other. All those times in which he's been head coach, he's beat this Bengals side. Colm has alluded to this explosive offense. Yes, they're one of the best in the league. Right now, they're averaging 271 yards per game. And bearing in mind that Jamar Chase, who's arguably one of the best wide receivers in the league, if not second to Justin Jefferson, hasn't played for a number of those games, that says it all. It looks like Joe Mixon, their running back, who's been out with concussion. He had 5 touchdowns in one game last month. And in fairness, they've had Panine step in and done really well. But he looks like he's going to come back this weekend. So they're getting all the players back on offense. And defensively at home, once they're not getting the sacks we saw last year, they're 28 in the league on sacks. Last year, at this stage of the season, they were 8 in terms of the ranking. But they seem to be coming together at the right time, collaboratively as a group, defensively and offensively. We've seen real improvements. And I wasn't impressed with the Browns last week. Deshaun Watson came back. In fairness, he was rusty. He only had 131 yards. But the Browns haven't played really well at all this season. They won the week before that against a Bucs team that gave that game away. I'm struggling to see how they can win this game. The only thing I would say is when their run game, they've a dynamic run game, 2 really strong running backs, and when they play together and they focus on the run, they can keep the other offense off the field. In the game which they played on Monday night this season, combined as a unit, the 2 running backs went for 176 yards, and they knocked the stuffing out of Bengals that night. I don't see it that way this time around. I think this Sunday the Bengals finally break the course, essentially, which they've had against the Browns for quite some time, and win this game.
Okay, so two both for the Bengals. That's going to jinx it now, isn't it? I know how this podcast goes.
Mark is on the Bengals as well, Callie.
There you go. Okay, well, look.
We're jinxing it.
All right, I'll just for the sake of non-jinxing, I'll say the Browns, even though I don't have a really dog in this fight, but that's okay. All right, game number 3 then. This is a big one for both of the sides. So it's the Vikings, who are 10-2 at the moment, and they are heading up there to Motor City to play the Lions, who are on a 5-7 record. Now, even despite those records, it was interesting. I saw that the Lions are actually the bookies' favorites on this one. So there's an interesting matchup coming here. Maybe I'll go back to you straight away, Brian, and talk to me about this one. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I was surprised to see the Lions favourite. We spoke highly of the Lions on Monday night in terms of how successful they were last weekend, and quite successful over the course of the season with their offense. I mean, last Sunday, 9 drives, 8 touchdowns, and the final drive was them taking these. Essentially scored in every drive. They didn't punt the ball once in the game. And I was looking through little notes and nuggets as to why they're favourites. There was a similar game a few weeks ago when the Vikings were playing the Cowboys. They were at home, and the Cowboys yet were favourites, and the Cowboys knocked the stuffing out of the Vikings. The Vikings defensively over the past 4 games have given up over 400 yards of offense, 486 yards against that in that Cowboys game as well. The Lions are playing really well offensively. They're bringing Jameson Williams back. He's the first-round pick last year, who was more of a long-term play. They took him. They knew he was injured. They didn't know when he was going to come back. It looks like he's going to come back this weekend. And we spoke on Monday about the amount of games in which the Vikings have been so close in, yet finding ways to get over the line and win them. And it looks like the kind of game where if they have a right matchup against them with an offense that is explosive as the Lions, they won't be able to deliver to the Lions team. But the problem is, it's the coaching for me. Dan Campbell had his best game last weekend as head coach. His defense had his best game since he took over. The game prior to that against the Bills on Thanksgiving Day, that game was there to be won, and bad coaching in the last 2 minutes of the first half and at the end of the game. I know it's not necessarily linked game for game, but you're asking me right now which head coach I trust the head coach is in his first year that has a team at 10-2 going in, despite not being favourites. They played each other in week 3 of the season, finished 28-24, close game. Similar scenario, Lions had it there to win. The Vikings found a way of pulling it out. I see the same thing on Sunday. I think really close game, high scoring game. I think it'll come down potentially to the last score, but I'm siding with the Vikings to go 11-2.
All right, Vikings it is. All right, Colm, how about you? What's your take on it?
Yeah, this is one where, and kudos to Dan Campbell and what the Lions have done, because I am very jealous of the Detroit Lions offense. And I wish that my team had an offense that was even half as effective. The only concern perhaps for the Lions is that, they probably thought I would have imagined that Jared Goff was going to come in, Jared Goff was going to stick around for 2 years, and then they'd draft, Jared Goff's replacement. But Jared Goff might be playing so well that he will take them out of contention for one of those top quarterbacks. And Jared Goff might be playing so well that they could win this game against the Vikings. Then next week, they go on the road to the Jets, depending on how the Jets get on against the Bills. That could be that the Jets are on a downer, or maybe it's a big emotional game for the Jets. And after that, they let their guard down a little bit. The Lions could be in playoff contention, but there's a long way to go to that. I would say I would expect this to be a very high scoring game. We know the Lions defense hasn't been great. We've seen them give up an awful lot of points. I was in Minnesota to see the Vikings, who were phenomenal on offense, but who did give up a huge number of big plays, and who have done that throughout the season. It will be fun. Certainly, I have little doubt about that. But for me, I'm going to go with the Vikings as well, because the 2 losses have been blowout losses, and they have been to 2 teams who I think will go to the playoffs. And there is something about a team that have had so many one-score wins, and they find ways to win, and that is such a transformation from last year under Mike Zimmer. It is a game where, Lions fans, I would not be surprised if you were to get the victory in this. And I wish, as I have said, my team's offense was half as good, or that was going in that sort of direction. Remember that they have their top pick to come in there as well, really, and to have the opportunity to really get going. So I think there are good days ahead for the Lions. I think the Vikings can get the victory on the road and essentially, lock up completely the division.
Very good. All right, so both of you Vikings. What did Mark call it, or have we jinxed this one as well, Brian?
We have, yeah. Mark is on the Vikings as well.
Okay, so I'll go for the Detroit Lions. So because I remember watching Beverly Hills Cop, and Axel Foley had the Detroit Lions jacket. I remember thinking, that's cool. So that's I'm just going to pick arbitrarily. I don't have the NFL depth of knowledge as you guys. So we'll see.
Now I know what your Chris Kindle present is going to be.
Yeah. If you can get me, Detroit Lions jacket and a Blu-ray of Beverly Hills Cop, then we're sorted. Yeah. Okay, nice one. So we're on to game number 4 now. So the hottest team in the NFL, really. We're talking about the Eagles, the 11-1 Eagles, and they are going to play a team I think you might like, Brian, the Giants, 7-4-1. Of course, that one was the tied game from last weekend. So this one's actually, Sky are picking this one for their main live broadcast, which is telling in and of itself. But maybe Brian, you kick us off here, being the fan. You might have a blinkered view on this, but you might have a more sanguine view. Give us your thoughts.
I'll give you an honest opinion before I do.
Okay, that's the best version. I like those kind of opinions.
We started off with a game blue and green in the Bills and the Jets, and Columns picked the green team. So I assume in this game you'll have to go with the blue team to line it up. Look, I was looking back at last year's games when the Giants played the Eagles, because Jalen Hurts the quarterback of the Eagles has had a fantastic season, and we're talking about MVP. He's right up there. And Colin has been on this, as we said on Monday. Colin has been on the Jalen Hurts train for quite some time, and I remember games last year where he wasn't as good, and the Giants in particular held him down for 4 quarters in the first game and 3.5 quarters in the second game. And back then he didn't have the players around him which he has now, such as AJ Brown, who we spoke about on Monday, going off in that big number against the Titans last year. But collectively as a group they've come together. Yeah, he's having a great season, but all the wide receivers having a great season. Goddard, the tight end, is injured unfortunately at the moment. He was having a great season. Running backs and Sanders, Bart Scott always seems to play well against the Giants. He seems to be coming in and out of the team, and offensive line this season has really improved. Kelsey's the main man there. He's holding that all together, and he seems to have them all playing in tune and alignment with one another. And defensively, this was actually something at the start of the season when we were doing our season preview. I did pick them to win the division, but I felt defensively would be one of the weak spots, and in particular the secondary, because he had so many games last year where he got exposed, but the secondary hasn't come to pass this year. For the Giants, what I wouldn't say is one thing that's been exploited this season in numerous games has been the Eagles' run defense. Now, Jordan Davis, their first round pick, has come back and had a really good game last week. But the Giants' way of winning this season has been consistent. You give the ball to Saquon Barkley, our main running back, and you allow him to do his thing. And for large parts of the season, it's been working. The offensive line has really improved. But of late, he's kind of backtracked slightly. The numbers, I don't know if it's a case of the grind of the season is catching up with him. For the Giants to win, they're going to have to get back to what was working throughout the early part of the season, which is run the ball effectively, keep Daniel Jones upright, and allow him to even be potentially in a position to do run-pass options. It's a big ask, generally, because even like when the Eagles don't use their run game and don't have Jalen Hurts running with the ball because he's such a dynamic runner of the ball, they still have him putting up 29 of 39, 380 yards last week, 4 touchdowns. And the previous week, he ran for 170 yards. So there's two ways of playing. Do you stop the run, or do you stop the wide receivers? Either way, he can do both. It's a big task for the Giants. As much as I would love to see them win, and I'm surprised how close the line is. I think it's more of a factor that in the NFC East game, they're always very close. I don't see the Giants being able to deliver to the Eagles team. But we have seen surprises throughout this season and many seasons, so who knows, maybe come Monday when we're doing our review, I'll be a happy man, but I can't see it happening this Sunday.
Okay, fair enough. How about you, Colin? So the Giants fan, even back in the Eagles here, how are you?
Yeah, that is quite something given how Mr. O'Leary feels about those free birds from Philadelphia. Brian makes a lot of good points in terms of, especially in the references to last year, but a stat, Calla, you like stats.
I love stats. Yeah.
A stat that stood out to me, which tells you, I think, how different this Eagles team is in comparison to last year's. So last year's Eagles team were 0-7 versus playoff teams. And that includes the postseason itself when they got there, because they lost immediately. So 0-7. They were one of only 2 winless teams in the NFL against playoff teams, the others being the Atlanta Falcons. This year, the Eagles have played 3 teams thus far, who the Vikings, Titans, and Cowboys, and they are 3-0 in those games. So this is a very different Eagles team that we're looking at. And Brian is right to call out the return of Jordan Davis. I think that is a real difference maker. Look, the Giants will undoubtedly be up for this. I've no doubt Brian Daboll will want his team to put on a performance against a divisional rival. The Eagles might be going into MetLife as I think any visiting team, especially with Von Miller's injury now. There seems to be an awful lot of worry and concern around the league about playing on turf. The home teams who play on it all the time probably have less concerns. I wonder, might that play in a little bit? But ultimately, I think the Eagles have enough weapons to get this done. I don't think it'll be a very high-scoring game. I think the Giants will keep it tight. But ultimately, between what they have on the ground and their receiving core, I expect the Eagles to get this done and to continue their march on. They will be 12-1 by my reckoning on Sunday night.
Fair enough. So Eagles all the way there. And I'll give you my arbitrary choice of the Giants. This will make you happy, Brian, because the only player I remember other than Jim Kelly from those early days when I watched NFL was Phil Simms. Wasn't that the Giants?
That's their boy. That's correct. I thought you were going with Randall Cunningham, the Eagles.
Well, I mean,
No,
there are many more I could probably pluck from the back of my brain, but that's the one that I remember. All right. Just to shout out before we go to the next one is if anyone wants to drop any comments in, we'll get to those after this one. Okay, so game 5. The Steelers, no longer one of our quickfire games because they've now won 2 in a row. Late playoff push here. And so it's the Ravens going to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. Ravens are 8-4, Steelers 5-7. No Lamar Jackson at quarterback for the Ravens. So what do you think? Can they do it even without him? Colin, perhaps this time, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the Steelers playoff push, but could they ensure that Magical Mike Tomlin finishes at or above 500 and continues to never have a losing season? Yeah, that might well be possible. And the fact is that I have always advocated starting your young QBs. They need to take their licks. They need to learn how to play in the league. And Kenny Pickett has had a steep learning curve, and he's not there yet. I think the jury's still out completely on whether he is a franchise QB, but he is 3-1 in his last 4 starts. And that is, certainly more impressive than his early season form. For the Ravens, my goodness, they absolutely fell over the line against a Broncos team who couldn't get anything going on offense. And the Ravens just couldn't seem to get out of their own way until that last late drive where they got the touchdown and managed to eke out a 10-9 victory. Certainly, I think playing soccer growing up, we would have had games with more goals. I went on the Ravens podcast last week in the lead up to that, and the Ravens fans are really unhappy with their OC. They are not happy at all with Greg Roman, and probably the Lamar contract situation is playing into that a little bit. There's so much uncertainty there. Huntley, I have seen him play the Bears last year, where I thought he played quite well at times, but I didn't think he had a good game at all against the Broncos. Now, the Steelers' defense probably isn't at the level that the Broncos' defense was, but the Steelers' coaching is better. They have an ability to score more points. The Ravens should win this, but Mike Tomlin absolutely loves divisional games. And given the season that we have had, I am going to say that Magic Mike finds a way and his Pittsburgh Steelers get another divisional victory. They go to 6-7, and the Ravens are, looking at the remaining fixtures and saying, "Oh, we got to win out if we want to make the playoffs."
Right, very good. So Steelers call there. Brian, how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts?
I have a feeling that this show might be one of the least entertaining we've had in a while. So many results going the same way. The Ravens over the past few weeks, Colin rightly called it out, they couldn't get out of their way last week, found a way to win. And when we were doing our show last Thursday, I reflected on the game which they played 2 weeks earlier against the Panthers at home, which they won 13-3, and it was a 6-3 with 6 minutes to go in that game, and they stumbled over the line. And the following week, when they went into Jacksonville, they were held down to 3 field goals in the first half, where they were in the red zone 3 times, leaving themselves in a position where they were scraping at the end to try to win the game, and they really should have won the game, only for Jacksonville to go down with a late drive. So they've been stuttering. They stuttered earlier in the season. They've had games in which they were leading by 10 points in 3 games, in particular in the fourth quarter. They found ways to throw that game away. The game in Jacksonville, as I just touched on, they were up by 9 points in the fourth quarter. Something's not right there. They're in a good position for the playoffs, but something this season is not right. Lamar Jackson, who's in a contract year, started really well to start the season. On this show, we were talking about how much he's going to get paid. He will get paid, but right now, especially with him out, Huntley kind of has similar traits to him, but he's obviously not at that level. He played quite well last year. Did enough last week, as Colin knows, the Broncos side are going in the wrong direction. But I have been impressed with Kenny Pickett, and me and Colin were in lockstep on this at the start of the season. They should have just put him in from day one. And like Columns called out there, 3-1 in his last 4 games. Last week he threw for 197 yards, no interceptions, no touchdowns, but it's game management. They won 19-16 in Atlanta. The previous Monday, similar enough numbers, threw for 1 touchdown, they beat the Colts. He had a reasonably good game against the Bengals the week prior to that, and the week before that, a similar steady game they won. It's all about game management. Mike Tomlin has now come out saying he's comfortable with the offense. He allows him to change the play at the line of scrimmage. It's no longer a case of that's the play, you run it. So it's a trust factor, and it's continuing. And they've beaten the Ravens 4 times in a row. They're gone for 5 in a row. Colin would say Magic Mike. I say Iron Mike, because I think he'll be the one knocking out the Ravens from the top of this division come Sunday, because I think the Bengals will obviously beat the Browns, and then the Ravens will be back in second place. So for me, it's a Steelers win as well. And Marcus Steelers. So here we go.
Jinxing it. Well, you leave me with no choice but to go for the Ravens here, guys. You know, even though I did have an arbitrary connection to the Steelers, my wife went to school with the Super Bowl winning kicker for the Steelers, who, given my NFL knowledge, I can't even remember his full name. Jeff Reed, does that sound possible? Is that his name? I can't remember. I'll get the name for you later. But anyway, so I'm going Steelers as well, just to fully jinx it, lads. Okay. Do we have any comments, Brian, that we want to chuck up just right now? I'm conscious we're kind of going into Game 6 in a second, so maybe now's the time to go for it.
Yeah, quite a few interaction. I love this one. Right, we have a regular. Cal, I know you're new to the show. We have a regular called Fred. And every day Fred comes out giving out about Odell Beckham and this potential move to Dallas. I think it's a bit of a love-hate relationship for Fred, because he's already on this evening saying doesn't look like he's going to Dallas. This is a very interesting one. So
he didn't go to LA either, because he got thrown off the plane. So there you go.
He was thrown off the plane for whatever came of that. But it all looked like last week he was going to Dallas. He went into Dallas. There was a concern about his knee and the medical situation, and Dallas now look like they're trying to play it down that they were ever interested in the first place, or that they're reflective of his medical situation. So who knows how this is going to play out. Quite a little bit of surprise to Colum's earlier comments about Zach Wilson, suggesting that the Jets won't be able to get rid of him until 2025. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, that we've seen, as it's been rightly called out by Keith here. Josh Rosen was in the second year, I believe, and he was traded away from the Cardinals once Kyler Murray was selected in the open round of the draft. There's a lot of chit-chat going on in the background this evening, which is great to see.
Great. That's great to see. Well, listen,
and there's a few comments around the turf. Yeah, Columns alluded to there. There's another one here. He's talking about the MetLife turf. The Rams and Chargers are coursing the SoFi turf as well. So there's a lot of teams that are looking to potentially move towards real grass and play on that. I think what's the problem is for some of the teams and stadiums is just commitments to have numerous concerts and numerous other events when the season isn't on, and to have proper field turf as opposed to the artificial turf doesn't lend a hand to concerts and other stuff, etc. Yeah. So that's that piece.
That'll rage on anyway, I'm sure. All right. Well, will we move to Game 6 then?
I think Colin wants to react to
Colin has a reaction.
I think, Brian, the comment in relation to 2025 might have been in terms of Russell Wilson. And yes, the Broncos are, unless they take an absolutely unprecedented, like doubling the cap hit, the Broncos are stuck. But the thing is that that Zach Wilson is on a rookie contract. So Zach Wilson could very easily come in and sit behind Russell Wilson, and essentially they would have 2 years of him on a rookie deal. They don't have to take the 5th-year option. Again, I think it's very unlikely. It was a rumor that I saw, but the Broncos have an unmerciful problem at quarterback and have to figure something out.
Sorry, I thought he was alluding to potentially giving up on that Wilson so early in his Jets career. No,
okay. Too many Wilsons, and ultimately the Wilson from Castaway was better than.
That was my thought. That's my thought immediately. I thought you were talking about Wilson, the volleyball.
Russell Wilson is playing like Tom Hanks in that film. He's shredded in the water
there. All right, and with that thought, we'll move on to Game 6. So. The last of the 6 p.m. games in these main previews. So it's the Jags 4-8 against the Titans 7-5. So Titans, they've lost 2 in a row. So it's a good game here to sort of rebound for them, I suppose. Or you tell me. I mean, Colin, what are your thoughts on Jags Titans?
Yeah, this has been, I suppose, and not a great week for the Titans in certain respects. They have lost two on the bounce, and they sacked their GM. But I think for a number of people outside the Titans really looked at the timing of the GM sacking and kind of really wondered about it. I think for a lot of Titans fans, they probably understood it a bit more. With the news today that Caleb Farley has had back surgery, and that essentially rules him out again. I think is it 3 back surgeries, 2 ACL surgeries before the age of 25. You're left hoping on a miracle for him to really work out, and the GM has essentially wasted kind of 2 years in terms of draft picks. So that has been an enormous problem. It also emerged earlier in the week. Now there's 2 things. One, that the owner, it doesn't seem was, or at least she says she wasn't consulted on the AJ Brown trade. And we also were all reminded with the video of Mike Vrabel's reaction to the AJ Brown trade. He was none too happy. And so there was a feeling that maybe it was a bit of a power struggle and Mike Vrabel won. But I felt a little bit, and if that is the case, maybe this bit is more understandable. The owner left Mike Vrabel to answer all the questions this week. So he was left to field the questions. Now, ultimately, if it was a power struggle and he won, I can understand that a little bit more, and I can understand why that was the case. And I get backing Mike Vrabel because you have seen his own players and other players come out to bat for him again this week. Taylor Lewan was on with Kay Adams earlier today and talking about him being the best coach in the league. And we also heard that Derrick Henry is quite cranky this week. Mike Herndon was talking about that. When Derrick Henry is cranky, there are a couple of teams that he particularly likes playing. Number 1 is the Texans, and number 2 is the Jags. And the Jags, after their great comeback victory against the Ravens, were very disappointing last week. Trevor Lawrence has an injury designation, and that is a problem. For me, I have the Titans righting the ship and getting back to winning ways.
Okay, Titans to right the ship. Brian, what do you think about that?
They couldn't have asked for a better game. To bear in mind, and it's a divisional game, and people say, "Oh, it could be close." Trevor Lawrence, who was the first-round pick last year, he's a great quarterback. We've seen great moments from him this season. 2 weeks ago,
he's the former Clemson guy, isn't he?
That's correct. Yeah,
I know that because my father and mother-in-law are massive Clemson fans. They're former Clemson grads. So anyway, that was something I actually knew you were talking about.
Unbelievable. Well, you mightn't get to reflect on Clemson this weekend because the likelihood is he's not going to play. He's very doubtful. You got to say it looked like a potentially season-ending injury last week, only to come back into the second half of the game and play reasonably well. CJ Beathard, who Colin would know from his days with the 49ers, is the backup there, and if he plays, with all due respect to him, I find it difficult to see how they can overcome this game. And the rivalry's there, but yet the Titans have found ways to beat them. I think it's 5 games in a row the Titans have had their number. And Derrick Henry, Colm's talking about being moody and grumpy this week. He didn't play really well last week. He wasn't allowed to play well. Eagles' defensive line stood up to them. I'd be surprised to see that if that was the case this week. I think Derrick Henry will have a big rebound game. And one player to look out for, Robert Woods, whether it was his time in LA or since he's come to the Titans, has always had really good games against the Jags, 80-plus yard games. Maybe he's one that'll have another breakout game on Sunday. For me, I'm with Colin. Mark is the same. We're all picking the Jags. The Titans.
Sorry. You're all picking the Titans, or unless I've completely misunderstood the game.
Titans.
All right, well then I'll go for the Jags because I guess it's the closest big cat to Panthers that I can think of, and I like the Panthers. All right, so then we're going to just do a quick rapid fire now on Texans versus the Cowboys. Colm, I'm going to ask you for that, and then I'll come to you for your pick, Brian, on that in a minute. So, Colm, take it away.
Yeah, I think both of the quickfires this week feature teams who just want the season to be over, and in this game, it's the Texans. They were fired up for the game last weekend, obviously against their former QB and everything that it surrounded, and him sitting out last year. And despite being fired out, despite getting off to a decent start, they just found ways to beat themselves. I mean, it was new ways to do it. For the Texans, they made changes at QB. Nothing seems to have worked. Brandon, they decided not to trade Brandon Cooks at the trade deadline. I wonder if they look back on that now with regret, given the way the season has gone. There really isn't anything at all to play for other than pride. But they're coming up against a Cowboys team who sometimes let themselves down by just not showing up. They lost a couple of games last year that they really should have won. But if the Cowboys show up, they should absolutely dominate this. The big thing for the Cowboys, obviously, is all the past few weeks have been spent flirting with OBJ. We talked about it in the kind of with the questions a little while ago. Jerry Jones kicked that to touch. How did the players respond? The wide receivers who, if he's not signing there, can they kind of take the step up that they need to? But no, as long as the Cowboys show up on Sunday, they should dominate the Texans.
All right. And Brian, what's your pick there?
He's just pick of the weekend. Not Texans, Cowboys.
You're stumbling there. Yeah, fair enough. Easiest pick of the weekend. How did Mark go on that one? Do we know?
Full house, Cowboys.
Full house. Okay, bang, bang. All right. And then on the other quickfire one, we have Chiefs Broncos. Brian, I'm going to get you to go for that one. And then I'll turn to you, Colm, for your pick.
Yeah, not as straightforward as people may seem this game. No, I'm sorry. No, look, what I would say is like the Chiefs lost last weekend, but going into the fourth quarter, the game was there for them, as Mark rightly called out in the show. And I was looking at the numbers today. Despite the loss, Mahomes threw for 223. Threw a touchdown, he had a rushing touchdown. He's still playing at MVP level. Kelsey didn't have the best of games last week. He was kept down to low numbers. And when he has a slow game, he usually really rebounds very quickly with a really big game. Really impressed with their running back. The rookie running back seems to be now nailed in as the number one. I'll let Colm have a go at pronouncing his name. Pacheco, is it? Pacheco? Something like that. Mark is very good at pronouncing it. And looking at the numbers from last weekend, a bright spot for the Broncos this week has been in their tight end, Greg Dolch. And again, last weekend, he was their leading receiver with 85 yards. It doesn't bode well for a team that's trying to get this offense going, despite the game being at home. The Broncos have been beaten by the Chiefs 13 times in a row. It'll be 14 and 14 Sunday, and I imagine 14 being the magical number, they'll win by 14 plus points.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. And Colm, same feeling there, Chiefs, or are you going with the heart?
Just a few more words. Yeah, because I saw a tweet that said, so if you're a Broncos fan that's a senior in high school getting ready to graduate, the last time you saw the Broncos beat the Chiefs, you were in 5th grade. For an Irish context, if you're in your leaving cert, you hadn't even started secondary school the last time the Broncos beat the Chiefs. And you will very likely be in your first year of university, having gone through the CAO system before the Broncos beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to win this.
The Chiefs are going to win this, I think, and even I know that. And my arbitrary reason for saying that is I like the Chiefs. I think Mahomes is a real maverick. I love watching him play, and my good friend Nathan is a massive, lifelong Chiefs fan as well. So I'm all about that. Okay, let's move on to the 9 p.m. games. There's a few of these. So the first one is my beloved Panthers, albeit not doing the best this season, up against the Seahawks. I'd love to hear what your take on that is. Maybe we'll go to you first, Colm, this time, perhaps.
This game, yeah, I mean the Panthers have definitely improved under their interim.
But they
head
couldn't have
coach.
got any worse, Colm.
I was about to say it is akin to winning a taller than Danny DeVito contest.
Yes.
And for the Panthers, obviously they've moved on from the Baker Mayfield circus and all that entailed. And look, for them, it's about who is going to be the QB there next year. They're going to, I imagine, draft somebody. I think probably the Russell Wilson trade will have scared everyone from trading for vets. So I imagine everyone is now going to look to the draft and say, we'll just go with the rookie contract. But if you look to their opponents, who managed to find in Geno Smith, a guy who obviously was in the wilderness for an awfully long time. But this year, Geno Smith, games with multiple passing touchdowns, 10. Rank in the league, first. Games with a 100+ passer rating, 9. First. Games with at least 70% completion, 8. First. Geno Smith is having a season. He has been absolutely outstanding, and the Seahawks are loving it. They got back on track last week, and you saw Pete Carroll getting them all G'd up on the sideline. Whilst the Panthers have improved, I don't believe they will have enough. And I think the Seahawks are headed to the playoffs. They might even exceed Brian O'Leary's expectations at the before the season began. We all laughed. We all pointed and laughed at Brian. Well, I don't know if we will be the ones laughing come the end of the season.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
The problem now is I now want them to start losing games, because they're obviously this impacts on my team, the Giants, potentially making the playoffs, because it's coming down to potentially 2 spots for 3 teams. So, look, last weekend, Seattle are having a fantastic season. They've 7 wins, and I quoted in August on a preseason show, which I showed Colm a video clip recently where he nearly spit out his coffee. I said they'll win a minimum of 9 games. And he's talking about Geno Smith in terms of how successful his season has been. Last weekend was his career game, highest game in his best game in his career. 28 for 32, 367 yards and 3 touchdowns. And yeah, I didn't think they played well. And I looked at the receivers' numbers, like they went off the charts. Metcalf was 127, Lockett was 128, both having receiving touchdowns. And yet, I wasn't convinced by them last weekend. Their defense over the past few weeks, I was in Munich firsthand. I got to see the game against the Bucs, in which I thought they'd play really well and win, because they were on such a hot streak. Their defense was flat that day. And I didn't think it was great last weekend. They had a couple of interceptions, which helped them out in particular times. And the Rams, for all the Rams' faults this season, with Walford as quarterback, they went up and down the field and were in a position to win the game with a minute to go. And the Panthers have done well recently. They played well for Steve Wilkes. And their defense on their day, as we've seen, they've managed to beat teams and cause shocks because their defense can play really well, and they have a strong running game despite the trade of McCaffrey. Foreman has come in and played really well, and there's a lot to be said for a fresh quarterback coming in. Sam Darnold has come in, and he's not had the best of careers, but he's come in late in the season, so there's a freshness to him. But I still think Seattle will win, because Pete Carroll just has a way of getting these results where you not necessarily we don't expect it. They are favourites. I can see it being a tighter game than people will think. But at home, I think they'll find a way to get over the line and push on towards the playoffs.
Fair enough. Obviously, I'm going to pick the Panthers to win. Watch next week when I get it right for once. All right. And what was Mark's take on that one there, Brian? Did he also go for Seahawks?
He did indeed, yeah.
Yeah, of course. You're cursing it. You cursed that one for sure, because the Panthers.
That's what I want to hear. Let's curse that one. If anyone can get cursed this weekend, that's the
Let's go Panthers. Let's go. Okay, game 8. It's a big one in Santa Clara. So Tom Brady and the Bucs, who are 6-6, they had that last second win on Monday. I was reading about it there. They are facing up against the Niners, obviously, who are at 8-4. And they, of course, we talked about this on the last show. They're going to have a new quarterback for the remainder of their season. Brock, one of many Brocks we mentioned. And please, in the comments, share any other Brocks, you know. So let's talk about it. Brian, maybe you first. Can Brady withstand this Niners defense?
It's a tough ask. It's a tough ask this week. You know, you're coming off a game in which Bosa's had 3 sacks, and I would say that defense for a large part carried them to that victory last week. They got home to the Dolphins, who were missing 2 offensive tackles. This Bucs offense. So we saw it earlier in the season. The Bucs beat the Rams at home, and everybody was on a crest of a wave. They went to Munich, and they won. But what people are failing to recognise is for 3.5 quarters of that game on Monday night, they did nothing. They had a really strong first drive, ended up with a field goal, and then they did nothing for the rest of the game. They were down 13-3 with 3 minutes and 14 seconds to go. And Brady has a knack, and he still has it even at 45 in ways of just getting these incredible drives. And even on the last drive then, thereafter, Saints still had an opportunity with some plays to win the game. But credit to them, they're hanging in there at the top of the division. And it'd be interesting to see how Brock Purdy can play this week, because maybe it's still early in this kind of period that people won't have enough tape and they'll have to reflect on what he did in college. So maybe he's in a position where he can play a steady game management, and bring them to a victory. Because right now the Bucs, if it got into a shootout, which I don't believe it would, the Bucs right now, their offense isn't teed up. Mike Evans, who's one of the best wide receivers, has been one of the best wide receivers for the past few years, just hasn't got going this season. He only had 59 yards in reception on Monday, consistent with what we've seen all season. In fact, his best play was drawing the flag at the end to get them in a position to score a touchdown. Defensively, they've carried him in many games. Devin White, Victor Vea was getting home to the quarterback on Monday night. It's going to come down. It's a low-scoring game. For example, the total points in this game in the bookmakers is 37, which is very low for a Tom Brady type of game. They don't expect it to go over 37 points. I can see reasons why it'd be that kind of game, but you're asking me which offense I trust more, despite the quarterback situation in San Francisco. They've got McCaffrey, Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. They have enough there to win this game. So for me, it's another home victory this weekend. I'm picking the 49ers.
Very good. 49ers it is. Colin, what about you?
That's on Gino a while ago, and there were 3 I think categories that I said he was first in the league in terms of this 49ers defense is first in points allowed per game, yards allowed per game, yards per rush, rushing yards per game, the number of first downs allowed per game, passing touchdowns allowed, and the number of interceptions. They are ferocious, and they might just be the best defense that Tom Brady has faced since he came into Denver in the 2015 AFC Championship game. And as Wade Phillips pointed out to Mark Cockrell, the Broncos hit him 24 times. I would absolutely love to see his childhood team and Nick Bosa do the very same. If they wanted to double that amount, that would be just fine with me, because as I said on Monday's show, it's Tom Brady's world and we're all just living in it usually. But he has looked fallible, I think, over the past couple of years. And if you allow him to do what the Saints did, Brian has talked about it, but at the end, they allowed the opportunity. If you allow the opportunity, he will take advantage of it. I don't imagine this San Francisco 49ers defense will allow him that opportunity. Brian has talked about the offense. For me, it's all about their defense, which is so formidable. And I am predicting the 49ers to win. I want the 49ers to win. I will offer up sacrifices for the 49ers to beat Tom Brady on Sunday. Please let it happen.
Please let it happen is what I heard there at the end. Well, okay. Well, we'll see what we can do, Colin. I'm no huge fan of Tom Brady myself, so I'm actually going to go with you there. I would like to see him roundly beaten in this one too. But okay, we are now down to the last game, actually, of the Sunday slate, and that's going to be the Dolphins, who are 8-4, and they're heading to LA to play the Chargers, I believe, who are 6-6. So maybe give us your take on that, Brian, with that game.
Yeah, this game has been. There was a lot of talk about this game recently because it's the game that was flexed into this Sunday night slot, which is the 1:20 a.m. game. It originally was the Broncos Chiefs, and they managed to remove that game because of the level of interest that would be there, unfortunately, for the Broncos, bearing in mind what's happening there. But this game has the whets the appetite. It's going to be a great game. You got the Dolphins coming off a difficult loss last weekend, going in against the Chargers, and the Chargers team that have been so inconsistent this season. We had Michael Lombardi on the show earlier in the week, and we asked him on this Chargers team, and in particular around the head coach and whether he'd be there next season. He kind of touched on the fact that the owners are quite loyal to both the GM and the head coach, so he might get another opportunity. But this is a team that was expected so much of, and in fairness to Dolphins, there was a lot expected of them. But it's refreshing to watch the Dolphins, and they had a difficult game last weekend. But as Colin rightly called out, he went through the stats on that 49ers defense. So sometimes you just have to take your medicine and move on to the next game. I think this game is much more winnable game for them. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they've got a really strong run game. I would expect Tua to come back. It looks like some of their offensive line who were out last week are struggling, potentially could play, which will sort up the line. And when Tua is given an opportunity and this, line works for him, he is very accurate. Quarterback, and he'll find ways to get the ball to players. And even last week, Tyreek Hill, despite the loss, had 146 yards and 1 touchdown. One of them was a bomb, so a lot of the yards go down on that. But at the same time, they still make plays. And for the Chargers team, lost last week in Vegas against the Raiders. Won the week before that against the Cardinals. Lost the week before that. There's no consistency. There's no trust level with them. Herbert again is another fantastic quarterback. The big game in a way, because these two quarterbacks were aligned in terms of the same year. The draft, one went 4, one went 5. There was a conversation of which team would take one over the other. So they're coming up against each other. And that will be the talk come Sunday night. But unfortunately for the Chargers, I think if you look at their offense, again, it was with the inconsistencies this season, Herbert is arguably the better quarterback, but he doesn't have the better players or team around him. So for me, the Dolphins will go in to SoFi, into LA, and win this game on Sunday night.
Okay, Dolphins is the call. Colin, what's your call and what's your take on it?
I'm glad that I disagreed on the Bills-Jets game at the start, because since then I think we have essentially been in lockstep, and I like Brian has kind of summed it up. This is all about the supporting cast around Herbert and the need to do more. There is a lot of hype around this game, particularly amongst, I suppose, some of the talking heads and analysts in America, because there's a huge debate around Tua and Herbert. Where Herbert was definitely anointed, I suppose, as the kind of Patrick Mahomes-esque QB when he came in, and he had an incredible first couple of years, and this year he has shown real flashes of it, but ultimately the Chargers have disappointed. A lot of people feel Herbert has been let down by the team, but equally people then say, well, this is the first year Tua has had kind of a competent head coach, competent offense around him, and look what he is done with it. So there are two very distinct camps. There is talk of Tua Anon, and they are very virulent in their support of their QB. So that will be something to keep an eye on. But ultimately, the Chargers defense is nowhere near, as Brian has rightly pointed out, where the 49ers defense is. The Dolphins hung out in California for the week, and while I expect the Chargers to make life difficult for them and for Herbert to play really well, ultimately I do think Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins will have more success this week, and they should be able to get the victory and make our friend Keith very, very happy.
Okay, so not a whole lot of disagreement tonight, guys. It's mostly, apart from that opening game, you're all tied up on everything. Brian, do we have any more comments from viewers that we'd like to flash up now before we close out and move on to our interview with Christoph?
Yeah, Colin was talking earlier about Goff, and this is a repeated piece that keeps coming up, and I think this is going to have to be one of the off-season conversations around whether the Lions continue to stick with Jared Goff as quarterback or go another route in the draft. I would just bear in mind, and I think we've spoken about before, the Lions have the Rams opening pick in this year's draft, which is at the moment they're picking at 4. So the likelihood is they will be in a position to potentially pick up one of these quarterbacks coming out of the draft next April. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But right now you can't argue with Goff. And then there's been a lot of Texans chat tonight, obviously, about last week's game, Deshaun Watson as well. Just a piece there around. They made a change of quarterback last weekend. They've gone back to Mills as it happened. So he said they should have kept with Mills. They've rightly corrected that this week. Davis Mills will start as quarterback this weekend in Dallas, which is again another difficult game. A few other bits and pieces around the 49ers. Again, Keith and Declan also, who's a Dolphins fan, has got involved in that. But one there, interesting one around Sam Darnold. Touched on the fact that he's fresh. More of it, I think, might be one of your gang on the Talking Balls podcast, the Panthers guys. Let's go Darnold going into Seattle on Sunday. Again, only a second game of the season. Could be interesting to see if he's still fresh. Never know, could cause a shock. But no,
I've seen him fresh, and he wasn't tremendous. I saw him live one time, but never know. Hopefully, this weekend will make a difference. Yeah. Brilliant. Any last ones, Brian, or do we? Or do you think that's the best of it?
That's the best of it. And Mark also went for the Dolphins.
Of course he did. Of course he did. I didn't even have to ask you that time. I knew that.
Yeah. And what I would say is that this jinx always happens. So, and it's the NFL, so there's bound to be.
Bound to be. Well, in fairness, not that my picks matter. I think I picked the opposite to you for pretty much all of them as well. So, I'll be the champ next on Monday when we're back to review all the games. And like as always, check out all the podcast platforms, get all that additional content. Like we said earlier, Brian and Mark did a piece earlier on one of the games as well that's already out there. All right, that is it, guys. Thanks a million for the conversation and for once again schooling me in the world of NFL. And we're going to close out tonight's show with an interview with Christoph Pink, who is the director of quantitative analytics from PointsBet. So Christoph will take you through that now. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody.
So welcome back to the Irish NFL show for a special interview and segment. As you know, we're always keen to kind of focus all the different aspects of the NFL and all the different aspects and opportunities that go with it. And there are some elements that play into the NFL that are Ireland. We've had a great partnership this year with PointsBet, a trading company that actually have all their technology and systems based in Ireland itself. And we got with us on the show tonight Christoph Pink, their Director of Quantitative Analytics, who is based in Dublin. You might sense from the accent in a second, he's not necessarily from Raheny. But Christoph, welcome to the show, first of all, I should say. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. Yeah, doing very well. Very excited to explain all about how we do sports here in PointsBet.
And it sounds French, I'm going to say. So we're going to say a Frenchman living in Dublin?
Yeah, exactly. I moved in Dublin in during the World Cup 2014. So I've been here. It's my third World Cup here in Dublin. That's how I count it. So moved in 8 years ago. Very happy to be here. I didn't manage to lose the French accent. So,
Well, you mentioned World Cup. Let's try and stay away from football generally. No mention of Thierry Henry and hands and things like that. We'll keep it safe and keep it on the American side of the fence. I'm going to start off, Christopher, just saying, quantitative analytics, we have a vague understanding, I'll say, of what quants do, from where it's shows like Billions, whether it's the movies like The Big Short. But can you explain to me in the first instance, and the viewers, like, what does this mean in a general sense, especially in the sports betting world where you're involved?
Yeah, so like in the sports betting world, I finance might be a bit different, but like in the sports betting world, quant refers to pretty much anything that has a number. So when we're trying to give estimation of what's going to happen next, when we're trying to price a given market, that's where like quant's going to be involved. So let's say if you see money lines being even, that price usually come from a pricing model, and those pricing models are going to be designed by the quants team.
Krista, interested to find out how you came to be in this role. Obviously, your career background, and obviously, as we touched on earlier, pre-recorded, your desire and love for sports. A combination of both. Can you tell us about your background and how you came to be in this role today?
It's kind of a funny story there, really. So I grew up in France, did all my studying in there, so high school, and then university there. I went to kind of like a very generalistic science, engineering, mathematics kind of school, like what they call there like grandes écoles. So it's they're like school of engineering, but like they kind of like they allow you to explore different areas and to apply math to anything. So I studied physics, mechanics, chemistry, and then like been using math to kind of like put like some sort of try to give an explanation of how the world works. And then when I came at the end of my master, I wanted to do a bit more. I wanted to explore a bit more that world. So I started to do a PhD in applied mathematics, and moved to Dublin for this. The funny story is, like, I never finished my PhD in applied mathematics because I guess I kind of lost interest. Like the spark was gone on this, and I was trying to find new opportunities. And during my PhD, the first year, I went to a math seminar to like that finance professor was explaining statistical arbitrage for like some obscure financial stuff. And he knew the founder of Banach, so the company that then became PointsBet Europe. And he was like, oh, I know that guy. He's starting a startup on like sports and, apply mathematical models to sports. Would you be interested to set up an interview? And I was like, actually, you know what? I mean, every day in the morning, I kind of like wake up and go on my sport app, try to get the news, try to get a sense. So it's something I'm really interested in. I was like, just let's give it a go. And then the guy was like pretty much explaining what you're trying to do is like you have a given sport, you want to find the correct descriptive model for it and apply the probability where it matters. So the way you think about NFL, like it goes play by play. So you want to build up a model. So like, you kind of go from one play to the next one. And then when you have a play starting, you kind of want to decide, is it going to be a run play? Is it going to be a pass play? What is the correct ratio depending on the score, different conditions, really? And, you want to train that model to do that correctly. And I just found that fascinating. And so here I am, like it's going to be 7 years. I started in 2016 in Banach and then PointsBet. So I've been doing this for a while and like applied to a variety of different sports like soccer, NFL, NBA, US sports in general. And it's been a fascinating journey so far.
Well, Christophe, I mean, let's focus in on that NFL piece a little bit more. In fact, I love the story because when your surname's Pink, I'm thinking of Pinkman out of Breaking Bad, and it sounds like you could have been a Dr. Pink if you'd completed that PhD. But you've gone into the world of sports bets, and look, we have a load of people that watch the show that are always interested in, hey, I'd love to get involved in sports, or I'd love to get involved, obviously, specifically in the NFL in some way. Just because they, like you and you've described, have a passion for sports and want to get involved in it all. And then, for them, and to give a bit more of a layman's understanding, if you could delve in a little bit more, like on a day-to-day basis, operationally, what does being part of the quants team mean? And what does it mean in terms of the selling, the trading and the betting markets for NFL specifically? I mean, you were talking a little bit there about, discerning the model. Is it going to be a run play? Is it going to be a pass play? I mean, how does that all come about? And with then dramatic changes like Jimmy Garoppolo's injury this weekend and things like that. I mean, there's lots of variables go into the mix, I'm sure.
Yeah. So like there are like a lot of different moving parts. Like in terms of like NFL, you kind of mention it. Like there is like a pre-match aspect. So before the game even starts, like looking at the injury lists, it's going to have an impact on how many points. Like what are going to be the expectation from the game. So like that aspect of it, it's something we can model and we can try to define what are going to be the score expectation. That part is kind of like it's more about trying to get the information, process it, and also try to get any sort of information to try to translate them into kind of a simple outcome. Like what can have an impact on the final score? Like you have a large variety of things that can happen. You mentioned injuries, but like imagine like the other day when the Bills had to move to Detroit, isn't it? Like there was a massive snowstorm. So how does that affect also like how many points you would expect during a game? So usually that kind of information, you're going to talk to like NFL experts, like you have the training room. Those guys kind of like look at Twitter. They have their own knowledge of the sport. They're going to be able to kind of assess like the different, like almost intuitively, they're going to be able to assess like, what is worth a point, what is worth 6 points, if there is more or less wind, if there is more or less rain. So like there is an intuitive part of it. We can back it up with statistics, but like, it is going to be mostly driven by like the training room trying to get a sense of what's happening, and also being driven by the types of best bets that are being taken off. So there is information being extracted from the crowd, and like Quartz would be involved in this, in trying to understand how we weight all that information, how we weight the fact that, let's say, some other bookmaker in the competition has moved. So do we also want to move? Do we agree with them? We're gonna try to understand exactly why they moved, and if you should also move back, and try to manage our risk accordingly depending on the type of bets we have been taking. So like it's really like here, it's like the pre-match aspect. It's almost about building the correct algorithm, automate some stuff that can be automated, and working very closely with the training team for that, or automate the ingestion of information. So that's one aspect of it. Also trying to take into account like the past performance. So we have built up model for this, and it's more about like the player performance. It's a bit easier to kind of like measure. Like if you know that the quarterback is doing a lot of pass plays, we're going to try to take that into account, and that information history, like that history we are building from the player, going to be ingested in our model moving forward. So like all that aspect of trying to get the pregame information for the team and also for the player. So that's one side of the story. Then there is another side of the story, which is around like in-play betting, which is like really the space PointsBet wants to focus on. Meaning that if you have set up your team expectation, if you have set up like, well, the Bills going to win by a touchdown, and they're going to be 5 touchdowns during the game, and let's say no field goals, right? That's going to be your kind of like score expectation. Then how do you derive the rest of it? How do you say how many yards, how many completion are you going to have from the quarterback? How many carries are you going to have from the running back, and so on? How many sacks the quarterback is going to suffer from? So our job as Quartz is mostly focused on this in PointsBet, trying to understand how the game unfolds and where are we expecting things to happen, and how the correlation is going to be building up. So like, if you see more points for a team, allegedly you could expect more yards, more passing yards, and maybe like more attempt as well. So if you also see more passing yards, you're probably going to have more reception. So we kind of need to have that understanding, so we can build up like one of our key products. This is like the same game parlay, so that like NFL enjoyers can place a bet on, let's say, the Bills to win, but also Josh Allen to, let's say, have 15 completion, but also run for 20 yards. So like that's the kind of exciting product we're going to build, and that's the kind of correlation we're trying to understand and give the best estimate for.
I'll take that bet, Christoph, by the way. I'll take that one.
That sounded like a very easy one, didn't it, Mark?
It depends the price I'm offering for you. If it's like 50-50, probably, yeah. But like, let's say we are playing against the Chiefs now, or we're playing against the Titans, or we're playing against the Jets, let's say. They have a very strong defense. Are you still taking the bets, though?
MVP type of player, I probably would still take the bet. Christoph, very interested on the in-play betting model and how you worked that today. The topsy-turvy nature of NFL. We saw recently Vikings-Bills. We're talking about the Bills and Josh Allen. That game a number of weeks ago, there was 4 lead changes in the last 2 minutes of the game. We've seen recently the Chargers, for example, going for a 2-point conversion at the end of the game to win. we see so many dramatic changes throughout the course of the game. Can you explain how the focus and all the thought process that goes into the in-play betting model in that instance?
Yeah, like the key to actually capture those movements is really to be able to have a very, very granular description of a game. In other words, our model are not going to really predict the final score as such. What they're going to do is like predict every outcome of every play. And when we're actually building up a model that way, it allowed us to capture very quickly any dramatic change you're talking about. So like, for instance, like what's going to happen at the start of a play, what we're going to say, okay, well, they are in the red zone right now. And then the model going to try to estimate what's going to happen next. In other words, what's it going to do is like, it's going to create like a lot of different versions of what could happen next. And in each of the version, it's going to decide, well, there is 60% chance they're going to go for the run here in the red zone, right? Because there is only 9 yards to go try the touchdown. And based on that, based on historical data, based on past performance for the Bills, but also other teams, we see that the strategy they use for this is like more like the run play. So let's say there's 60% then what's going to happen then is like, let's say in 60% of our simulation, they're going to go for the run, and in 40% of our simulation, they're going to go for let's say the pass, for instance, or maybe something else. Like the point is our model going to define like different types of outcomes from the play, and then from there it's going to unfold. So let's say you go for your run. Let's say now in those 60% of simulation, we start and we say, okay, it's going to be a run now. So now the question is like, okay, you go for the run, but like, how many yards are they going to be able to run through, right? So what we do is like we look back at the past again and trying to see, well, when they carry the ball, then usually they're gonna, there is 10% chance they're gonna go with 2 yards. There is maybe 15 they're gonna go with 3, and so on. So we kind of build up distributions of the length of the run, and then like in that big simulation, we're going to say, well, in one simulation, they're going to go up to 10, it's going to be a touchdown. And in the other one, they're just going to go for 1 yard. So in one of the simulation, we're actually going to have scored, and then it's going to keep going. And then, once they have scored, you go for the kickoff, and then the other team going to have possession, and we're trying to estimate what's going to happen in that simulation for up to the end of the game. And then the other one, they're still going to be stuck at the second down and then second and goal. And then they're gonna decide, are we going for the run or the pass, knowing that now it's not first and goal anymore, but second and goal, and so on. So that's how we kind of simulate what's going to happen in the remainder of the game, trying to understand play after play what's going to happen, and that way we actually can capture very quickly what's those dramatic changes you're talking about. Because like, yes, they happen, but when you look historically, you kind of can see the succession of shifts. All those dramatic changes, you're able to capture them looking at historical data.
And as the game evolves, are you finding in terms of the better pre-market as opposed to in live betting in terms of in the game, the activity being more substantial over the course of the last few years? Because previously it was very much around betting prior to the game, but now these days with all these options, more and more people are getting involved in during the game in terms of the betting.
There is a change here in terms of behavior. I think it's also linked with technology as well. So, like one of the major reason I'd say people wouldn't bet in play, it was extremely difficult to place a bet. As like you're talking yourself about this is like you have dramatic shifts. Like if there is a touchdown being scored, like the odds are gonna just change dramatically, and usually the way bookmaker would react is by just suspending the market, not allowing the customer to place a bet. What we are trying to build here in PointsBet is the best customer experience. So like it's actually easy for them to place a bet. It's also easy for them to like place exotic bets. We were talking about SGP earlier. We strongly believe that it's much more interesting for someone to kind of like place that kind of like exciting bets rather than just say, well, the Bill's going to win. We also want to be them to be able to place it. I'm seeing now that it has starting to rain, so now I'm thinking they're gonna maybe carry the ball a bit more. So now I actually want to place a bet on the Bills to win and Josh Allen to run the ball way more. So that's kind of like we're trying to build here, trying to make sure that it's intuitive to place the bets, eventually going moving forward in terms of like customer personalization. Like, maybe some people actually are big fans of the Bills. Some people are actually, they hate the Bills, so maybe they actually want to bet on the under regarding Josh Allen. So we are on that journey, trying to give the best experience for the in-play, and that's what the numbers kind of show, that there is interest for the customer to be able to like take that information and place the bets. The other key product we're trying to launch there is the what we call like Lightning Bet, and for NFL specifically, what we have built up is like just bet on the result of the current drive. So let's say you kind of like you open your TV or you bring on a streaming platform and you watch the game, and then like you kind of feel like the drive had been 3-4 plays into the drive, and you're thinking, you know what, I just do think they're gonna be a touchdown at the end of that drive, and then meaning you actually can place the bet. Then the drive gonna unfold. It's a touchdown. Happy days. You get your money and everything, and then you kind of keep placing another bet maybe on the next drive, or you can just decide to just happy with your games and have a pint there. So like we are trying to offer more in-play enjoyment. Like we want to add more to the game while adding more in-play markets and allowing people to just like bet on those granular aspects of the game. So there is the drive. Are they going to cross a specific yard line, or for the next rush, how many yards are they going to carry, or for the next, what could be the longest pass in the game? Like, that's the kind of market we want to offer. That's the kind of like excitement we would like to give the customer. If they only bet on the money line, really, I think it's exciting, and we want to be able to offer a very seamless experience for this. But we also believe there is more to offer to the customer.
And Christophe will touch on this in a second, but obviously this is about US customers as well, because PointsBet story in Ireland and in Europe is not about the markets; it's about what you're building. It's about the technology. So, for people betting and losing at all last weekend or next weekend, you're going up against not necessarily Christophe's model, but similar models in relation to how it's all built. I'm always fascinated, and thank you for breaking us down through some of that, because I'm always fascinated about how much of a level of detail goes into the models, because it's all well and good. Like we were talking only recently about how there's been more comebacks this year through 13 weeks in the NFL season than ever before in history. There's been more 10-point deficits outweighed. So, of course, Monday Night Football was wiped up by the Bucs, not only having a fourth quarter comeback, but also wiping out 10-point deficit. But that's more a macro trend, whereas your model's going into, well, hey, is there 11 personnel or 12 personnel or 21 personnel on the field? Who's the running back? What's their, past history in terms of running the ball, catching the ball, etc. If people are Seahawks fans, yes, there is no model in this world that still explains why Pete Carroll threw the ball from the 1-yard line in the Super Bowl. But your model explains most things.
I'd say the opposite. I'd say probably, I'd say there's probably the model would have predicted there was like maybe a 1% chance they would have made that decision, and they did. We're just living in that timeline,
And then a 1% chance that it ends in an interception as well, which is the worst possible result of all scenarios. Christophe, actually coming back to, and I touched on it a little bit, as I say, the Irish and European story is about that technology provider. It's about, as you say, the models you're building, the rest of the team are building, the technology behind, the intelligence, I'd say, behind a lot of these aspects. Whereas, obviously, you're a provider in that regard to the US betting industry and the market. You're obviously trying to recruit and grow the team, and there's some amazing technical talent available, technology talent available in Ireland and across the EU. It's a marketplace of 500 plus million people, and of course we have about over 1,000 tech companies in Ireland in the native industry as it will. But like, what would your advice be for anyone that's listening to this and is saying, I have a technical background. I'm like Christophe was a few years ago. I'm interested in sports. I'm interested in the NFL. How would they get involved, or where would they go to in relation to get more information on what PointsBet do?
Well, I mean, there is always a website, first for start, like on the PointsBet website, and we have like the current offers. but I'd say overall, like there is a lot of different. Like it's not only about mathematics and statistics. Like I think there is a lot to cover on this. Like it goes to understanding, the sports, and that's more like the area I'm being involved in. So like on that, I'd say really on that point, like it's about having interest for math and be curious, really. And then for the other type of job where like maybe more software oriented, I'd say still be curious. I think curiosity is probably the key thing here. It's like if you're curious about how things work and you want to solve issues, problems, and you kind of want to have the jigsaw and say, maybe there is another angle to this. But you also want that jigsaw to be around sports. In that case, PointsBet is probably the good place to be, because like this is pretty much what we breathe, day in, day out. We love sports here. NFL is one of them, but like there is probably more, and we are trying to have a vision, like a global vision of it. It's about understanding the sports. It's also providing the best experience to the NFL fan, really. So like to achieve that, there is a lot of moving parts. So you can be a sports nerd. That's correct. I'm one of them. I enjoy it. But you also can try to maybe offer like a very sick interface to like the betting app, or you can try to say, let's say, well, I want to really provide the best experience for the customer. So what about like a better recommendation engine, like personalization? So like you don't have to scroll and find the market you really want to do. It's just brought to you, so you can easily place the bet you want to place for that specific fixture. So like there is a lot. There is really a lot to cover in terms of that customer experience, and that's one of the key value of the company, which is like we want to delight our customers and we place them first and like front and center.
So it's all about people who have a passion for really great CX as well, then, And
yeah, exactly. And like offering the best sport experience possible. And I think like if you have that passion for the sports, you're probably the best place to actually offer it. So yes, there are like technical component of it, but like the passion is probably the one thing we all have in common in PointsBet. So like if you feel you have that passion, like I suggest you to apply.
Christoph, as the interest in the NFL continues to grow here in Ireland and around Europe, and obviously the excitement of placing a bet, what excites you most about the quant side of betting in for the future, what the future holds, and in particular around PointsBet?
I'd say like the amount of data that is going to be made available in the coming years is going to be amazing. Like really, like if you even today, like if you think about it, you look at the NFL game and you have those Amazon Next Gen stats, right? That's the data we're gonna use, and it means like you're able to assess in real time where are the players on the field, where is the ball, how fast it's going. So that means like not only you can just also offer bets on the money line, you can offer bets on the rushing outs, but it means you have a better comprehension of the length of the pass itself. It really means you can try to understand a bit better what comes from, let's say, the skill of the receiver or the skill of the passer. I think that's one of the great, very often regarding quarterback, who is the best quarterback? They throw the ball, but like someone has to receive it, right? And then the key question is like, who is the most talented? Like, is Tom Brady great because of Gronkowski?
Yes, he is. Just to answer that one, sorry.
So and with that kind of data, if you have that kind of data, the granularity telling you when the ball was thrown from that point of the pitch, and you have that length of a path with that angle and with those conditions, we actually can try to abstract out and try to see, well, if I look at all my data and I look at that kind of pass, regardless of the quarterback, regardless of the receiver, I kind of establish like let's say how hard it is to catch it. Then from there, we can try to estimate the added value of a quarterback and also the added value of a receiver. So, and then ultimately you can have a way better understanding of everything that is happening in the game. And you can probably offer like very exciting bets like what's going to be the longest pass of the game, rather than just saying, you know, how many yards. Because like sometimes like you can have a Hail Mary, it goes really, really far. Like they're going to go really deep and then throw it like probably, who knows, maybe more than 100 yards. So maybe you can actually bet above that mark. So I think it's an interesting one, to just be able to offer that aspect of the game. But also the other one is, I mean, I think you should try to put more emphasis on like the defensive plays. Like myself, I enjoy way more a good defense than a good offense. Maybe I'm a bit weird on this front, but I like to put, you know, the light on the good defenders, and like plays more, like have more bets being offered on that aspect. You know, how many sacks Aaron Donalds are gonna have. Like it's a key one, but maybe we can actually highlight more of them, because I think they're also a very important part of the game.
Yeah, and you know, quarterback hits and pressures and all of these new statistics that keep coming out on defense might be interesting. I must admit, Christoph, I love that piece, because you talk about new data, and I'm a nerd for that stuff as well. So Marcus Jones the other day was the fastest skill player for the Patriots on offense all season. The only problem is he usually plays cornerback, and it was his first snap on offense of the season. So, but that comes from the Amazon Next Gen stats, as you say, as well. And I think I saw something about Devontae Adams and the routes he runs and how far he runs and the different techniques he uses. And again, greater analytics, Amazon Next Gen and others say, you know, stat line says 8 catches for 177 yards. But then you look behind the detail as to how and why he did that against the number one cornerback against he's playing against, you know, puts it into even more stark contrast and everything as well. So, look, we can't wait to see it. We can't wait to see what you guys come up with then in a further sense, with the opportunities of that further information. Really appreciate your time today. And we're also really looking forward to coming out to the PointsBet offices, speaking further with the PointsBet team, and a special outside broadcast we're doing at your offices during the January playoffs. Want to also thank you and the team there, the whole PointsBet Europe team, for the support on the betting pod we've had during the season. In a general sense, we do want to reiterate, obviously you can't bet with PointsBet in Ireland, but if you are betting on the NFL this weekend or any weekend, please do gamble responsibly. And just to reiterate again, if you are listening to this and you're interested in kind of like this side of the business, you're interested in the various areas on the technology side or the marketing side, the CX side that Christoph's looking at and talking about there, bear in mind they're based in great new offices in Dublin here. You can go to pointsbet.ie to find out more about the careers, opportunities, and more about the company as well. It is, as I say, it's not about betting. It's about the technology, the systems, and the great CX behind the scenes, which is what Christoph and the team in Dublin provide. Christoph, yeah, just thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate your time and the great insight on all the different nuances that go into making up that part of an NFL weekend and Sunday for all of us.
All right. Thank you for having me.